Hello and welcome back to another episode of Red Dot Forum Camera Talk. As always, I am David Farkas. I'm joined by Josh Lehrer.
Hey, everybody.
We've got Jose Rivera producing.
Hello, hello. Hello, everybody.
With his new, slightly better camera. Is it in focus? I can't even tell.
I think he's out of focus. The camera's probably in focus. So.
Well, everyone loves the Jose cam, so we're just making it better.
Making it better.
Enhancements.
Absolutely.
Good stuff.
And joining us, as always, in the chat is Kirsten Vignes and possibly Peter. We never know.
Well, last time we promised Peter, and turned out he was only there in spirit. So
He was.
let's not make any false promises to Peter's presence.
That's right.
This time either.
That's right. So welcome back, guys. Thanks for joining us on this lovely, balmy Saturday night.
Well, balmy here.
Balmy here.
People, let me see. I can pick one non-balmy place. Costa Rica's probably pretty balmy.
Allendale, Florida is definitely balmy. Oh, wait.
It's Ontario.
London, Ontario is
maybe a
probably
little
beautiful
cold.
right now.
We
So
love it.
we'll be there in spirit.
Sorry.
All right. So before we get started, we posted something on Instagram.
About what? What was it about?
It was a caption, a crazy screenshot. So credit has to be given because we actually did not even find this screenshot. One of our lovely viewers,
I believe Tim Floyd, I think that's shout out to you, found this screenshot.
Yeah.
And sent it to us before we even had this episode planned. And I pretty much knew I had to build an episode
Oh my
around
God,
that.
it was amazing.
Because it was just so funny.
Yeah.
And so fitting.
Right, because we kind of at the same time look, and it's not photoshopped at
Yes.
all.
It's real. It really happened. If you watch that episode from last week.
It really happened.
It really happened.
So we thought it was so funny. We put it on Instagram and asked you guys to caption it. Now, neither Josh nor I have actually seen these captions yet. So we've gotten them sent to our phone.
Here we go.
And we're gonna do a little live reaction here.
Well, and why are we doing that? Well, not other than because we're idiots.
So we're gonna pick on air right here the funniest one, or at least our favorite, whatever.
In our humble opinions, which by no means are comedic.
Right. So we're gonna
experts.
do. I think it's gonna be definitely a three-way vote here.
Yeah.
It's gonna be me, Josh, and Jose. We're gonna vote. We'll each have our favorites, and we'll tally up quickly the winner. And the winner is gonna get a red dot wear cool
Wetzlar Doodle thermos.
Wetzlar Doodle thermos.
Yes.
Which we showed on the last episode,
Assuming you're in the United States.
which is imaginary right here, unless we have one magically over there.
No, but you've seen it. If you're not in the U.S., we'll send you our love.
Condolences.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Why don't you go first, David? Pick one.
Okay. So here we go. Jose, pop up the photo.
Oh, you're gonna put
there
it.
we go.
There's
Yeah.
the photo. Okay.
There's the photo.
I didn't realize you had it.
Okay.
Oh my goodness. I should have worn the same shirt.
Yeah, sure. All right, here we go. Let me pull this up. So, let me read. Okay, here we go. And the red dot is this big. All right, Josh, you read one.
My favorite, I think, on this page is, why did you wear the plaid shirt? It was my turn.
Oh, that was my favorite.
No, that was a good one.
Okay.
We don't have to read. We don't have time to read them all.
Yeah, let's see.
There's a lot. There's 5 pages.
We're gonna do it fast. You dropped it again?
But wait, it depends.
Okay. I swear the fish was this big.
But will it blend?
The Leica Apo Summicron 35mm focus is this close.
David, did you just put a second Nick on a 35 Apo? Well, I know my favorite. Oh my goodness.
That's brutal.
Oh,
That's
I
brutal.
know. That's so good. All right.
Okay. For the last time, the Leica M rangefinder will never have a permanent EVF.
We have to go faster.
Yeah,
Let's pick a few. So let's just do 2 more from each page. Okay? 'Cause there's too many.
I haven't read them yet.
Let's see. When you see a red dot painted black with Sharpie, ooh, that hurts. That hurts.
All right. And I think this is apropos to this episode.
Yes.
It depends, but the thermos is about this big.
So true. All right, next page.
Oh, but you got to read that one.
Which one? We're not saying it was aliens, but it was aliens. Okay, that's pretty good.
Okay, I like that one.
Roughly how much patience we have left for one another. Yeah, that's probably too generous, I think, but yeah, that's fair.
Camera Talk, Jazz Hands tutorial episode.
Let's see. I love Enzo this much. That's true. All right, yeah, let's pick like a few more. On the last page, go. Second page. No, one more.
Oh, there we go.
We're almost done.
Let's see. Okay. Leica fanatics when they hear another black paint is coming.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
I go to the last page here. No, we don't know when it'll come out. Stop asking. That's hilarious. All right, so
okay.
there's a lot, and
So what's your favorite?
my favorite has to be.
The flat shirt? Or?
No, David, you just put a second Nick on 35 Apple. That was Tobin Chad on Instagram. That's my favorite. What's your favorite?
Let's see. I kind of like, let's see. Yeah. I kind of like the, we're not saying it was aliens, but it was aliens. Yeah, we'll go with that.
Okay, Jose, what do you
Jose,
like?
what's your favorite?
There's one here that you guys didn't read.
Okay,
what
what is
what?
it? What is it?
Hold up. Enzo and Jose put an electric charge on our seats.
I don't know if we can pick a winner. Maybe they just all three will have to win. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so.
I think so.
I think we have three winners. Yep.
All right.
We got 3 winners.
So congratulations to the three of you who got a red dot ray thermos. Hopefully Kirsten or someone wrote that down so we can re-DM you, see which color you want, and then
If only this was recorded.
if only. All right.
If only.
Thank you for submitting,
Yes.
everyone. A little cheesy on our side of things, but we love there's a lot of great stuff. Much funnier than we are. So
Yeah.
thank you for that. And if you guys like this kind of silly, dorky stuff,
We'll do more.
let
of
us know because we'll happily do more with glee. In fact.
In fact, if you like really cheesy, dorky stuff and you want to see a lot of that,
Yeah.
check in the video description. We have the blooper reel
Oh
from
my
last
goodness, yeah.
from last year. So that's kind of hilarious.
There's gonna be so much good stuff for the next one.
Okay.
A black paint lens cloth. That's funny. I just read that in the comments, in the chat there.
Wait a minute. What?
Oh, here we go. Our egos are only this big. That is no. I don't have my arms long enough for that.
The screen. The screen.
So, thank you for that. Now, of course, David, this is a bit of an unusual episode. Give us a bit of a description of what our viewers can expect this evening.
Well, it depends.
And there we go.
Okay, if you've been watching the show long enough, and we've been doing this for almost 40 episodes now, and if you haven't seen those, we have a link to the playlist down below.
Come out.
Check them all out. Okay, if you've been watching us long enough, a lot of we'll take questions, and it's like, well, what's better, this or that? It depends. And we're not just being cheeky. We're not just being smartasses. I mean, we are.
We are,
We
yes.
are cheeky smartasses.
Yes.
But it really does depend because there's no simple, this is always better than this, and you should always do this and not that, right? We want to give you the best information available to help you make informed decisions, right? So and people kind of tease us of like, it depends. In fact, I think in the blooper reel, there's like us saying it depends for 5 minutes straight.
How fitting that we do a whole episode about it.
So, in all seriousness, we wanted to kind of dive deeper into some of these more common it depends scenarios that we often deal with, that we often consult on, because we want to explain not just our opinion of why we might choose something, but why you might choose something. So why don't you explain a little bit more about that concept?
So the goal with this episode is not to be a versus episode or a this or that. Should I do this or do that? We'll probably have an episode like that later.
I'm sure.
And that's inevitably what the Ask Us Anything shows turn into, which we love. But our goal tonight is to try to give you the tools and the insight and the inspiration to help your decision making and strategizing when it comes to using, selling, buying your Leica gear, how to choose what for different scenarios, and how to come to your own conclusions based on what we can share and what a lot of other great resources online will share, so that you love your photos and you love the experience of making the photos. That's the goal, because there is no one right answer for everyone.
Well, it's no one size fits all.
Yeah.
There's lots of sizes because in photography, everyone has different preferences in terms of what they're trying to achieve, the kind of photography they're going out to do, even how they're going to be carrying these things, right? I mean, are you taking a huge bag or you just want to carry one camera? Do you want to be discreet? Do you want to not care because you're shooting bears and they could care less if you have a small camera?
Yeah.
You know, it really depends.
Yes, and there's so
many
much. Now, David and I have we're fortunate enough to have a very extensive sort of back catalog of experience helping people solve these questions and problems for many, many, many years, thousands and thousands and thousands of times. So we kind of take for granted that we can just work our way through those questions almost instantly and give you an answer. We want to try to give you more insight into what that process is like.
Yeah.
What that workflow is like of when we get asked a question and give an answer, what happens in between, and
sure.
how to then take that and apply it to your own work.
Yes.
And
Yes.
photography. So this will be a little bit different than some of our like super gear techie episodes. We're certainly going to talk about gear because that's what we do.
All
But
the
it's not
things,
about like how many megapixels, blah, blah, blah. That's not the point of the show.
Yeah, like we talked about, it's not a spec rundown. We're not gonna be like this versus that versus this because this is newer and better and everything.
Right.
And I think, and I'm gonna say this right off the bat. Josh always says, and I'm gonna let him say it, right, that we live in a very fortunate time because we are definitely,
Boiled.
we're spoiled with the amount of choices that we have.
Yes.
As photographers, more so than ever before. And anything and everything that we're going to talk about will result in incredible quality pictures for various scenarios
Yes.
for different people. The goal here is to say what's going to be, I guess, what will you find more happiness, more satisfaction if we want to get a little bit more
Yep.
touchy-feely about it?
Sure.
What is going to be that ideal scenario for you? So I know we're talking about this.
Yeah, we're gonna get started, and this episode
Blowing
will be a journey we're going to take together. And I feel that as David and I get warmed up and we start getting into this, we may get lost in some topics, and that's fine. But obviously, we're going to be keeping an eye on the chat.
Yeah,
and we value
glancing
greatly
over
the input you guys give because we wouldn't have a show without it. So
Yeah.
if you watch the show before, you know that tangenting is basically our thing.
It's kind of what we do.
Yeah, that's kind of what we do. So why don't we start with one of the most common scenarios that is presented to us involving one of the most popular cameras
Oh, yeah.
that Leica makes. And I'm going to use, there's three of them really, but they're all the same, which would be the Q system. So the Q Type 116, the Q2, and the Q2 monochrome. Why do you think this camera or creates as many questions as it answers?
Because on one hand, it's so incredibly capable, so portable, so
There it is.
so easy to use. Great quality lens, great quality electronics, nice built-in electronic viewfinder. It basically I like to call it the popular kid because pretty much everyone loves the Q. There's a but though, right?
Yes.
There's a sacrifice. No matter when you choose a Q, you're giving up the option to change the lens. I could probably pull this off here with enough force, but won't
Please
work.
don't. Please don't.
So when you get the Q, it's a package deal. You got the camera and the lens. They are one and the same. This is a single package. So if I'm choosing the Q, that means I'm choosing a 28 1.7. And that means I'm choosing it for every scenario. Now, that might be great for you, right? And this is where it comes to it depends.
Exactly.
Because you might say, I only ever shoot a 28. It's perfect for me. I like it. Or you could say, I like being limited to that one lens, so I'm forced, creatively into a certain type of picture. So there's certainly options there. But I think, we can look at the Q system because the original Q, the Type 116 or the Q1,
Right here.
the Q2,
Yep.
and the Q2 monochrome all share the same basic body and same lens. They do have different internals. But otherwise, we're talking about this from an experience standpoint.
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about the Q.
Yes.
If I have the option of a Q of whatever variety,
Mm-hmm.
or do we have a 28 here?
Yeah, there's one right here.
28.14, right? Nope, that's a 35.4.
That's here.
Yeah.
There we go.
Or let's say I'm an existing M photographer. I've got an M10R here, and do I go ahead and get a 28 1.4? There we go. Okay.
There it is.
Now that's a 28 1.4. It's a great lens. And interestingly, I'm just going to hold it up here. It's not, if you could mount, this is always tricky, isn't it? There we go. if you could mount this kind of lens on this camera, you'll see these are almost the same size. So these are very, very similar lenses because they're similar in terms of performance and what they do and what they offer. It's a full frame 28 millimeter lens, fast 1.4 aperture. This is a fast 1.7. So let's think through this one.
Yeah.
I already have an M system.
Mm-hmm.
Or I could say I have an SL2, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But I still have the option of either buying a 2814
Mm-hmm.
M or let's say a 28 F2 SL.
Mm-hmm.
Why? For similar pricing,
Mm-hmm.
because let's say, make it simple, the 28 F2 SL for the SL system
Mm-hmm.
and a new Q2 are roughly the same price.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if someone says, what's better?
Sure. So
What are we going to do?
normally we would just give a snap answer, but let's think a little bit deeper about what this means. A lot of the questions I'll ask in this scenario is, number one, are you the only one who's going to be using the camera?
Mm-hmm.
If you go to Florence with your family and you're out and you're photographing, and maybe it's got some serious photographic aspects to it, but at any point you're going to expect someone else to take a picture of you or you or your family, well, you're not going to hand them an M10 and have them figure it out unless they happen to know how it works. Whereas you got a
Right.
Q or a Q2, you hand it to them, it's going to work fine.
Right.
So I think about that.
Okay.
I think about from a dress and comfort standpoint and how casual you're going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Because I could be at a restaurant with friends, with family, or by myself, and I could have a Q2 and I could pop it on the table.
Sure.
I can hang it off the chair. Doesn't matter. It's not in anyone's way. It's not, I don't want to say obnoxious, but it's not imposing. You start getting into an SL, you start getting into an M10, you're going to get questions about it. What is that? Is that a Leica? Can I see it? So do you want to be left alone or do you want to be bothered? Another question. Now, that's not a question that has anything to do with resolution or megapixels or anything.
Do I
Now-
want to be bothered? I didn't think we'd be handling that question
Yes,
on the air.
but I mean, seriously. So your mindset, whether or not you're going to bring a Q with you, is first has to be, am I going to bring the Q alone? Or am I bringing the Q to augment
Right.
something like David's saying, like an M with a 50 or an SL with a whatever?
Right. Now, I could think of a scenario where another positive for bringing a Q also rather than an extra lens, because now, let's say you're traveling somewhere, you have an extra body. You have a backup. If something catastrophic happens to your camera, you have a whole nother camera because you're basically getting the lens, but you're also getting a camera attached to it. I mean, we tease about that all
Yeah.
the time. We're like, because given the price, you're basically just paying for the lens and getting a free camera. You know, it's a joke, but when you work on the numbers, it's pretty much that way.
Think about this. Let's say you're an SL shooter. Well, what does it mean when you bring a Q2? One battery charger instead
That's
of
true.
two. You bring an M, two battery chargers.
That's true.
Are you going into an environment where it's going to be dusty and rainy, like a beach or the rainforest or something
Weather
like that? Q2 is pretty hard to turn down because it's weather and dust sealed. And bodies are weather sealed, lenses are not. That's a little bit risky. So again, not just about resolution, not just about features. We're talking about you need to ask yourself, what am I going to be doing? Who am I going to be with? Who's going to be using my equipment? Is it just going to be me? Am I traveling internationally? Am I limited based on the size of bag I want to bring? Are you bringing a laptop? Here's a great example. I travel sometimes, and if I'm not bringing a laptop, I can bring a much, much smaller bag, and I'll actually change my kit around it. So I may have an SL2, a 24-90, and a 5814
Okay.
in a larger bag with a laptop
Yeah.
because I need it. Let's say I got to work on that trip. I bring a laptop. But I'm not going to bring a laptop. So I can get away with my little Ona Bowery, which is like that big,
Yeah.
and I can bring an M10 with two lenses. So my packing strategy and my gear strategy has, in that case, nothing to do with anything other than
What
am I
you can
working
fit.
on this trip or not? Because then my bag strategy is based around it. So
Right. And let's say we choose this instead.
Yeah.
Now, it's a 28. It's not a 2814, but it's a much smaller 28. And talking about your strategy, what I'm thinking about is this is now a whole lot smaller than that. Okay, if you have a really small bag, instead of a Q and an M with, say, a 50, I could fit this 28 almost in a pocket. If I have a field code or something, I could just drop it in my pocket.
Sure.
I can't do that with the Q. So that's kind of a plus for a lens selection rather than a camera. I would also say, from a kind of getting in the groove kind of feel, if you're shooting with an M system, you're generally feeling a different way about your photography. I know I do. I take different pictures with an M than I do with a Q. And that's not a dig on a Q or an M. It's just I tend to look for different pictures that suit that system the way it is. So if I'm going to go out with only an M system and a 28 and a 50 and a 90, well, I'm going to shoot very different pictures than if I go out with the Q with the 28. Because I do think that the Q is more spontaneous, both good and bad.
Yeah.
It's very quick. You just point, click, focus, snap.
Yeah.
It's like done. It's really, really quick to work with. I think the M, it makes you slow down a little more. It's more methodical and just more deliberate, where in a lot of ways, the Q sets you up. It's not really any more difficult than operating your iPhone, where it's just, you can easily just go and do picture taking. Where I think with the M, you really have to be focused on picture making. You have to be a lot more deliberate in composition, exposure, focus, everything. And that's not to say that if you go out with a 28 on the M and a 28 Q, that you can't make the exact same pictures at the exact same quality. I'm not saying that either. It's just you get inspired and look for different pictures to suit the style. So maybe if you're really into M and really want to keep in that groove without breaking it, then a 28 for the M makes more sense.
Yes, I think that as a mental exercise, I have a harder time shooting really seriously with the Q, to be totally honest with you. Now, I know people making amazing photographs with the Q who shoot very seriously, which works for them. For me, I pretty much need to have an SL or an SL2 with a 24-90 or something in my hands to really feel like I'm doing something. It's kind of like, if it's too easy, I'm like, oh, this is too easy. So a lot of that is, how serious is the outing that you're about to take?
Sure.
And what is your photographic mindset going to be? Because even if you're by yourself, if you're out there wherever you are to do a little shopping, or meet up with friends, or just enjoy the space you're in, you may not be that serious about photography in that exact moment. Q2 is perfect for that, because what the Q2 doesn't do is compromise on image quality.
Yeah.
Or even the Q. Forget about which one. They're neither of them.
Right.
And that's what you don't want to do in the end, is make pictures that aren't Leica pictures, I guess. Like, you don't want to look at a picture you take and feel like this wasn't where I wanted it to be. And thankfully with the Q, you're really not, unless you leave the lens cap on, you're not going to run into that. So there's so much thinking in our minds that goes into, am I going to bring a Q, or am I going to bring an M or an SL? And it's so much more than just, do I want a camera with interchangeable lenses or not? There's, like we just talked about, there's all of those things we think about, which all distills down to, it depends.
Yeah.
And I want to keep this train going with a question that Frank just asked. I just saw it, which is, so Frank asked, if you could only bring one camera with you, which one would you bring?
It depends.
Now, this is a great question, because it does mean it depends, but I think it goes along with what we're talking about, which is, which one would we bring? And we would say, it depends.
Yeah.
Why does it depend? Well,
Scenario.
there are so many different variables that you as a photographer pretty much need to have answers to preemptively before you go out on, you say with you, I'm assuming you mean traveling on like a photo adventure.
Yeah.
I mean, what are some of the variables that you got to think about?
Well, I mean, I think about, okay, let's do a hypothetical.
Yes.
And I'll use an example. So I'm going to go to the Smoky Mountains with my family, okay, which I did last summer. And we're going to go on a hike. Okay. I'll probably do a little bit of research, because I'm crazy like that, and I'll see if there's other photographs that were taken in the area and where those vantage points are. Am I going on any of those hikes? Am I going on a waterfall hike where I would need, some ability to slow down and shoot a waterfall? Or would I need a certain angle? Or am I getting to the mountaintop at the summit and there's a great viewpoint, but it really needs a telephoto? And I need to think, let's say I get to this amazing vantage point and I've taken a Q on that hike. I can get wide pictures, but I'm not going to get that compressed stacked mountain landscape.
I'm going to grab on something you just spoke about as well, which is the need for a tripod. But it's not even that simple.
No.
Because if you're traveling domestically, checking a bag, you could bring a tripod that'll be suitable for an S or an SL. If you're traveling either internationally or maybe you just have a carry-on bag,
How about that?
your tripod's going to be much smaller, something like this maybe,
Right.
maybe a little bigger than that. And that tripod strategy is going to change what camera you bring
Yeah.
and what lens you bring. And that tripod strategy is based around your packing strategy and your travel strategy. So you see it all goes back, and you need to be thinking about these things because David loves to photograph with the S. His photographs, like with the S007, the S3, in Iceland, around the world, are crazy. I don't imagine many of those are taken handheld.
A lot were.
Really?
And- yes, and in fact,
All right. Well,
in fact,
a lot of the long exposure ones.
hold on, I'm going to come clean though.
Okay, tell me.
because the first time that I used the S007, which was not the first time I used an S,
Yeah.
I went to Iceland and I got my own car and I drove around and I had no itinerary, just kind of went, which was very difficult for me because I couldn't make very good mileage because every 50 feet or so, I just would stop.
Yeah.
And because, oh my gosh, look out the window. And for those, because I didn't want to get out of the car, I actually would just roll down the window, scoot up in the seat, and shoot out the window. So I don't half the pictures I took in Iceland were shot out the window with either a 45.
But you had a
or
tripod with you, right?
I had
And
two
you had-
tripods with
okay,
me.
that's my point. We're changing it a bit. But
Yeah.
my point being is David's packing strategy allowed him to bring a camera that he wanted to bring. So
Sure.
you would say, if I could only bring one camera to Iceland, my first gut is I want to bring the S, but I have to say, wait, am I going to be able to bring the supporting equipment, in this case the tripod, suitable
All
for
right.
the S?
I'll give you an even another specific example.
Yes.
So we have an upcoming workshop to Greenland, and it's been kind of a existential nightmare because you're only allowed an 8-kilo bag, 1 8-kilo bag
Wow.
carry on.
Okay.
It's a little plane to go to Greenland.
Yeah.
And they weigh your luggage. And I'm like, what am I going to take? Because I certainly couldn't take an S system with 6 lenses. That's just not going to work.
Yeah.
Okay. What do I take? M doesn't make sense because it's too wet there. It's cold. You need a grippy camera. You're going to have gloves on. So, okay, that makes me think SL2. SL2 is great. Now what lenses? Well, I've got to have all the lenses, but I don't have the weight for all the lenses. And I haven't solved this problem yet.
Yeah. Well, you touched on another thing,
Yeah.
which is, are you going to be shooting with gloves or not? Because you may say, I love the Q2 and you have to pry it from my cold, dead hands. And that may literally be the case because if you go somewhere where you have to photograph with gloves, you need to make sure the camera you're bringing is suitable for that.
Right.
Q2 probably, but I think an SL2 would be better for that. So when you really get into what's going on our brains as we're like chewing our way through these questions, as David's in the process of doing it now for Greenland, you'll have to follow up and tell us what you decide. I have some ideas for you.
Yeah,
but you can see that when we say casually, oh, it depends, it really does. There's so much to think about. Now, I'm gonna guess there's discussion in the chat about the CL as well. The CL is an interesting middle point between the Q2 and an M or an SL2. And it's something that we struggle with because we often shoot CL as well. I think a lot of that is about the weather sealing of the Q2, the macro mode of the Q2. So you would say, what are you interested in? Like, I like watches and I like cars and I like doing close up. In that case, I'm probably going to bring the Q2 because I have the macro functionality built in, because I may not want to bring a CL with one lens plus the 60 macro. I may only want to bring a small kit.
Right.
That comes down to the packing strategy too.
Sure.
Because automatically then if I want to do macro, if I have anything other than a Q2, I have to bring another piece of kit. Whether it's the macro adapter, the 60 macro TL, 120 macro S, whatever it may be. I went from one thing to 2 things.
Yeah.
So that's another plus for the Q system as well.
But sometimes more things is better.
Sometimes more things is better. Sometimes we go out into the Midwest and we have backpacks with 15 lenses in them, and that's totally fine.
Yeah.
And that's a scenario where you can get overwhelmed with gear. Because suddenly the it depends question is happening in real time.
Oh my God.
Because it's almost like David and I, we can look at each other and say, what lens should we use? We have 30 lenses in front of us. What do we use? And you get to this point where you spend less time making pictures and more time thinking about.
Well, you get that's analysis paralysis. Right?
Yes,
It's
yes,
like,
yes,
I
yes.
don't know what to do, so I'm not going to do anything.
So that's the other side of that situation. So these are the kind of variables when you say to us, like, if you could only have one camera, it
No,
depends.
I can't. I can't.
I
have
mean,
one
we
camera.
can and often do, but I'm going to be thinking about not only what I'm going to be shooting, but how am I going to be dressed? Where am I going to be shooting? Inside, outside, with friends, by myself, with a photo group, with my family. Then am I traveling domestically? Am I traveling internationally? What kind of bag am I bringing? Am I worried about it getting stolen? Things like that. Like,
Yeah.
there's a seemingly never-ending list.
Right.
A list that you've gone through many times.
Too many times.
Yeah.
Too many times. And to touch on the CL, so I'm going to give you a little what I actually decided to do
Okay.
in the Smokies.
Okay.
So we went on a few mile hike, whatever it was, up to the top of something I don't remember. It was up. It was very pretty. What was not pretty was the fact that I took a full-size backpack
Oh no.
with a SL2, 1635, 24 to 90, and 90 to 280,
Sweet kit.
and
Yeah.
a 35 f2,
Oh boy.
which I never touched.
Yeah. Not
I
surprised.
just took it for exercise.
Yep. Yep.
Okay. And at least I got a really good workout. I slept extremely well that night.
Hey, you get to this.
Okay. And I'm going to just say, generally, that was a bad decision.
But you learn from it.
But I learned from it. And ultimately, I realized that all the pictures on the way up were, I got some okay stuff, but nothing amazing. And it was those ones that you're going through in Lightroom, you're like, I don't even want to look at these. What's the next one? And you're just skipping over 50 at a time.
Yeah.
And probably my favorite shots from the trip were with the 90 to 280. Like a handful of shots with the 90 to 280 were just so much better. I also didn't touch the 1635, which how is that possible? It's a landscape lens. Not that landscape.
Yeah.
That landscape didn't lend itself to anything that wide. So I could have saved myself considerable calories and sore muscles if I had just taken the 24 to 90 and a smaller bag just with the 90 to 280 in it.
Yeah. I think you also touched on this a little bit, and then again, tell me a little bit about, or tell us a little bit about how, if at all, but I think you do, you leverage your existing Lightroom catalog as well as the available resources online to refer to images to help your
That's a good
shooting
question.
and
Yep.
your packing and your camera choosing strategies
sure.
for future photo adventures.
Yep. And I talk to people, and when we're trying to figure out what's a good focal length to focus on or the zoom range, you can go in your Lightroom catalog and you can select your metadata in the library view, and you can filter down by focal length, and you can see, and it shows you actually in a list. I can probably bring it up, although
It's okay.
your testing data is in there, and it's going to be like one focal.
Yeah,
length.
that won't be viable for this.
But you can see the numbers. And what's really important to do is make sure that they're rated photos. So for instance, I have let's say like a 2-star, 3-star, 4-star system. And I'll say, okay, show me all my 3-star photos from my entire catalog. And now I want to see what filter by focal length. And if I say, oh my gosh, like so many of these photos are at 35 millimeter, and I think that I'm a 50 millimeter shooter, and yet all my favorite photos are taken at 35. It's like, well, there's something there.
Yeah.
Or I can look at my landscape images, and I can see, wow, so many of these were taken at 200 millimeters, not 16.
Right.
That's interesting.
Right. Yeah, you can think about what you
right.
brought and
Right.
look at your results. Because in the end, the pictures speak for themselves, and you have to look at the images you like. It's easy to shoot, edit, you download, you edit, and you move on to the next adventure.
Right.
But as your database and your Lightroom catalog builds, and as you continue to get more images you're happy with, you can start to see the patterns.
Data mining.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or
You're analyzing your own.
you can go the
photos.
other way and see, well, I own a 24 to 90 and an SL2, and everything I shot is between 50 and 90. So that either means you should try 24 and 35,
Right.
or go out and buy a 50 and a 90 prime and sell the 24 to 90.
Yeah, maybe.
I
Right,
think
exactly. I mean, right, if you have, let's say I have a 24 to 90, I've got a SL 24 to 90, and I'm going to town, shooting all over the world with my SL, and I bring in my catalog and pretty much everything is like either at 24, 50, or 90. Nothing in between. There's nothing at 32. There's nothing at 24. There's nothing at 75. You could probably just go with a 28, 50, 90 prime kit.
Yeah.
And it'll end up being more convenient in a lot of circumstances.
I agree. And something else I discussed with someone, I think a couple of weeks ago, was I asked them, because they were asking me about this kind of discussion, like which camera, which lens. I said, well, should I get a 28 or a 24? It's like, well, how often do you crop? They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, go back in your Lightroom, look at all your shots with your 35 and your 50 and your 20, all the lenses you've tried, and tell me on the ones you liked, are they full frame or did you crop? Because if you're shooting all the time with the 24 and you're saying, I'm a 24 shooter, and every image is cropped to 28 or 30 or 35, well, you're not really a 24 shooter. I mean, in that sense. So I say, well, go with the 28. If you love that 24, but you find you're always cropping, why don't you try 28? Because then you're going to be shooting full frame. So don't neglect the data and the usefulness of your existing catalog. Even the pictures you don't like, you can look at them and understand, oh, I don't like that because I shot it at 16 and the subject is so small or whatever.
And using outside photos as a resource, do an image search wherever you are. Go on Instagram and search the tags of the place that you're going to go photograph. And thumb through and say like, oh, I like that photo. I don't like that. I mean, we all know what we like and don't like. And this isn't cheating. This is inspiration and it's research.
Yeah.
Because you know what? If you're going to drive on a road trip somewhere, it's a good idea to look at the map and see where you're going before you get there. Likewise, it's a good idea to get a feel of where you're going, what the pictures are, what time of day, and generally you can also tell kind of what focal length. You can see the big difference in a 16 shot, a 50 shot, and a 200 shot. I mean, they visually look very different.
Oh, yeah.
And if you can go through and say, I'm going to be going to some whatever in the Clingman's Dome in the Smoky Mountains. Okay, hashtag Clingman's Dome, Great Smoky Mountains, right? And there's going to be thousands of photos of it because people go there all the time. And you say, my favorite photos are at dusk and actually at 280 millimeter. Like, why would I bring a 16? That's not the shot.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to just a quick comment from JDD. He says, simplicity breeds creativity. I would say simplicity and preparedness breeds creativity. Because if you go simple and you bring one camera and one lens, that's awesome. But if you didn't really think about it, it's going to be hard to be creative if it's the wrong tool for the job. So now sometimes you don't know.
And on that note, we're going to cut to Jose, and he's going to tell us about his recent experience.
Oh, my goodness, yeah. Sorry, Jose, I'm going to throw you in the bus there.
No, you guys were talking about the Q2, which is a camera that I just took on a trip to Puerto Rico. I went for about 4 to 5 days with my family, so we weren't doing anything, too crazy. So I said, okay, let me go with something simple and just take the Q2. So talking about preparedness, I was thinking about this before on the trip and saying, okay, I might, there might be some rain. I might just be with the family the whole time and not have to be not time to be switching lenses. So I said, let me just take the Q2, keep it simple. And it was compact, it wasn't anything heavy. And it was great. The only thing is the fact that I wish I would have taken something a little bit longer in focal length, like a 50. Just because there were many photo opportunities that I said, that subject is a little bit too far away. I can't just do a digital zoom with the Q2. So now I know for next time, maybe an M10 with a 28 Summicron and a 50 Summilux would have been the perfect setup.
Right.
Just because I didn't experience any rain. I was, a lot of times I was in the car or, inside an apartment or a house. So having like heavy gear with me wasn't going to be a problem. And I had time to, switch lenses, focus on the rangefinder. So yeah, it's a good lesson. But besides that, it was great because I could use the macro for some things. I could even crop a little bit with the 47 megs. So, that was a good experience to learn that next time, keep it compact, but also have another option with an M10, for example, with 35-75 or 28 and a 50.
Yeah.
But yeah.
You learned.
As
we all have many times and still often do. One of the questions I liked in here, I want to see who it's from to give credit. Jeffrey Totaro, what was your worst packing mistake? Can you think of any?
I mean, that was pretty bad, having to lug all like 30, 40-pound camera bag up a mountain.
Yeah.
But, whatever doesn't kill you makes you have better stories later.
Yeah, fair point. I mean,
What was my worst packing mistake?
yeah.
It's funny. I'm kind of more like Jose, because do I regret taking way too much stuff with me? Kind of. I mean, I regret it at the time, that's for sure. Do I regret it now? I'd probably do it again. So for me, my motto is I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it, because it's that maybe I'm too prepared because I want to be covered for every scenario. And yet I want to address that the simplicity breeds creativity. I absolutely do believe that. And I think
I don't know if you believe that.
as exercises,
Okay.
as good training for yourself, because think about conditioning and training for photography like you would for a sport. We do practice. If you're a marathon runner, you might practice sprinting, even though you're not a sprinter, but it can condition different muscles. If you're a sprinter, you might run long distances to try to condition your endurance or whatever it is. Make believe running information here. So let's say that I'm an SL2 shooter at heart, right? And I go out and I shoot landscape and I bring the big guns on every trip. Well, sometimes you've got to train yourself and say, I'm going to just go out with an M10 monochrome with a 35-1.4, and that's it. And I'm going to go. Now, I think you need an environment where that will thrive. So let's say I'm going to go for a weekend in New York with a monochrome and a 35, and I'll tell you what, I probably would be happy as can be because I've done that. And I had no problem whatsoever. And I never said, oh man, I wish I had my 16 millimeter zoom, because you tend to look for and seek out pictures that match what you have. And it's true. You're not thinking in real time about what I could be using.
Because that's a great point, but there's a very, very important variable there that David did obviously mention, but
I snuck it in.
No, it's that, yes, he brought a monochrome and a 35-1.4, and that's a very limiting kit, but he made great photos. But it's not because necessarily just the limitation allowed him to be creative. It's because he's skilled and practiced with that equipment, because the less you bring, the better you have to know it to get the most out of it. So if you know that your approach is going to be a very simple one camera, one lens, one camera, two lenses, that's awesome. I love it. But make sure that you know that equipment intimately so that when you're in those scenarios, you're getting the most out of it, whether that's how it handles, how it focuses, what the viewfinder experience is like, whatever the equipment is. Make sure you've really mastered it as much as you can and spent as much time with it as you can, because then you're going to get your money's worth. If you just take a camera and lens you don't use that much and go on a trip and be like, oh, I'm going to be super simple, that's awesome, but you're probably not going to be super satisfied either, because instead of trying to breed that creativity, you're really just going to be limited by some of the technical things you're trying to figure out. And I've experienced that with new cameras.
I think there's a fine line between being forced to be creative and being frustrated.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And that's often we're on either side of that line. But I think that if you want to limit yourself, that's great. But just make sure you're doing that with some experience or forethought, so you gain some of that experience before, like maybe if David was going to New York in a month, prior to that month, he would be around the office with that combo, playing with it, getting a feel for it, getting to know it. So I do think that familiarity combined with simplicity, combined with preparedness, breeds creativity.
Well, that's kind of what I'm saying. I prefer to do these kind of exercises in isolation and where it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
I mean, if you come out with good pictures, that's a bonus.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter if I'm going around my neighborhood with only one camera and one lens and something maybe I would never have used, because you're forcing yourself to get outside of your comfort zone for a little bit. But the stakes are so low. There's not like, if I don't get the shot, well, I'm losing my Pulitzer. I mean, you're just, it's very, very low risk, and it allows you to hone and practice your craft. So when you're gearing up for something real or important or once in a lifetime, then I think you're better informed as to what works and what doesn't.
Absolutely. I mean, it's free to shoot as many pictures as you want on a digital camera, pretty much.
Yeah.
So there's very low risk. I remember the film days, not as much as he does, but I did start with film where every roll was precious. Now you can just shoot around and you can begin to gain that familiarity and that feel without the additional expense of processing and the risk of losing a frame or whatever. So I encourage everyone, as people are traveling more and we have workshops coming up, to not only begin planning how you're going to pack and what you're going to bring, but then putting that gear into practice, even if it's just around your house, around your neighborhood, you go down to the local park, whatever. And imagine that you're in Iceland or Greenland or Norway or whatever.
Antarctica.
Exactly. And try to put yourself in that mindset so you're understanding all the aspects, even something as simple as, how many shots you get out of a battery, or how the tripod plate attaches to the camera and what wrenches you need to do it, all these little things.
Yeah, I mean, let's be real for a minute. When we get questions, and you've seen us give advice and say, well, in this scenario, this does X, Y, and Z, because we put it in that scenario. There's no replacement for firsthand experience. And you can read about it, you can watch weird nerds on YouTube talk about it, but there is a very different learning experience when you're up against those challenges in real time and you're thinking through and you're having that experience and you're either being comfortable or uncomfortable or forced to do something or coming up with solutions and workarounds. And that's the real, I think for me, to really get a hold of something and really understand it, I've got to really just dive into it 100% and use it. So we try to use everything, obviously. There's a lot.
You've seen the condition of our stuff. There's
a lot.
It's been used.
But that's the best advice. If, sometimes it's like, well, will this work for X, Y, or Z? I'll get a question of, well, if I shoot the macro, would I be able to shoot butterflies with it?
Yeah.
Go and try to shoot butterflies with it.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about if you own it already, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, right.
It's different if you don't own something and you're asking us. That's different.
Right.
But we're talking about equipment that you own or can try.
Right.
But there is obviously that other variable, which is, okay, Josh, I don't own something. I don't own this lens. Should I get it? And I'm going to ask you, if you're talking to me, all of these questions. And I have absolutely turned people off in emails, especially when they say, what should I get? And I'm like super excited. I'm like, I can't wait to help you work through this. And I asked them like 15 questions, itemized, because I only want to give someone a really, really good recommendation. And they're like, I'm not going to bother. I'm like, okay, well, that's fine. Because like we always say, it depends. And we've covered, what time is it now? Almost an hour.
Oh my gosh.
About just some of the things that David and I think about normally in just a matter of 10 seconds or so, about how we're going to make a recommendation for someone. So that's why I have to ask all these questions, especially in the world of Leica, where it's certainly at a price point where I want to make sure someone getting it is really happy with it and really feels good about it. We've hung up on this topic a lot, so let's go to another topic. What do you think? We have some stuff that we've got submitted ahead of time, so we're just scoping it out to make sure. Oh, I like number 8. Yeah, that one's cool.
Okay. And actually, this is a favorite of mine too.
Yeah.
This is as old as Leica.
Well, this is a question that's, I think, or a scenario that's pretty unique to Leica because of the history and because of the M system specifically and its compatibility.
I think did we talk? Wait, are we looking at the same question?
Number 8.
Exotic. Okay.
Yeah.
Not this one, but this one. Okay.
No, I know, but I'm talking about you have previous generations you can go to for
right,
for
sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not vintage. I wasn't talking about that.
Gotcha. Okay. The amount of times that the two of us have had this conversation
Oh my goodness.
of, okay, I'm new to Leica. Great. I want to get an M camera and I'm thinking about getting a Noctilux because I've read everything about the Noctilux. It looks like the best thing.
Which Noctilux? You're talking about the 50 Noctilux?
Sure, we'll talk about the 50.
Yeah, be specific here.
Yeah,
Okay.
the 50 Noctilux probably is the most common. It's been around for the longest.
Yeah.
I want to get an M10 and I want to get a Noctilux. But that's it. That's my whole budget because, there's nothing left after I spend it on the Noctilux.
Right.
And maybe I can't afford the 0.95, so I'm going to look for a nice f1. Okay, great. What do you think of that? Well, what do I usually say?
It depends.
It depends. So we're going to ask.
Here we are again.
We're going to ask, okay, what kind of pictures do you like to take? That's the number one thing. What kind of pictures do you like to take?
Or what kind of pictures do you want to take?
Do you like to take? Do you want to take?
Yes.
What are you using now? What have you used? And what's worked for you and what hasn't? We'll kind of group all those things together. And they say, oh, I just want to take, walk around pictures. I like travel photography. Like, the Noctilux may not be the best choice for you. If that's your budget, if you're prepared to spend Noctilux money, I'd recommend, let's say for travel photography, a 24 or a 20, let's say 21, a 35, and 75.
Yeah.
Okay? For the same price. So you can get a 21 Super Elmar, you can get a 35 Summicron, and you can get a 75 Cron for about the same price as a Noctilux. And that's going to be a much more flexible kit for travel photography. If they say, I'm all about portraiture and I want that really exotic, vintage, shallow depth of field look that only I can get. I say, oh, okay, Noctilux is that's great for that. Do you do anything else? No, that's all I shoot. And sometimes I take pictures of my dog. Okay, great. Enjoy your Noctilux.
But then it comes down to, if we're talking about a 0.95.
Oh, and then the next question is, well, did you think you're always going to shoot at 0.95?
Well, that also. What I was thinking is, how are you going to use it? Are we talking about on an M9, on a Film M, or on an M10? Because let's be real, having a VisaFlex on an M10 with an Noctilux is going to make life a heck of a lot easier for when you want to be really, really, really precise, like at close focus, wide open. If somebody says to me, I want the Leica Magic, I want to buy a Noctilux, and I'm shooting on an M9, I'm going to say, well, get an M10 first and a 50 lux, and then maybe build up to a Noctilux later, because you're probably not getting your money's worth relative to what's possible with, unless you're super, super experienced with rangefinders, which maybe you are. Then I'd say, yes, get a Noctilux. Like, see, there's so many things that we need to know. Or I'm just going to tell someone, the Noctilux is right for you, buy it, have a nice day. No.
Yeah,
no.
I mean, generally, my opinion on, and there used to just be one Noctilux. It was a whole lot easier.
Now we did a whole show on Noctilux.
Now we did an entire show, and lenses like this are very different and specialized. But even when we're looking at the 75 Noctilux or the 90 Summilux, or the reissued 50 1.2, when it comes to these lenses, they're really good at what they do for a very specific thing, a very specific application. And I'm not saying just portraiture, you can use it for lots of things, but I'm just using that as an example, where you really want to emphasize shallow depth of field, subject isolation, kind of dreamy creaminess, if you will, beautiful soft bokeh. Those are Noctilux characteristics. And I'll say the Noctilux is generally not the first lens that you would get. It's
although I do know people that have done that.
And I do too.
And sometimes it works out great, and sometimes it doesn't.
Sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
It's also pretty heavy.
Relative to an M lens,
right, relative to other M lenses. Yeah. And I'd say generally it's a fourth or fifth lens. It's when you have a full collection and now you're looking to build out from there specialized tools that you can do something. It's like if you're a carpenter, you need, a hammer and a saw before you get some like micro planar angle thing.
Yeah.
That's true. Like there's specialized tools in any kind of trade, but you need your basic tools first.
Right.
Before you can move on to this like micro specialized, I'm going to use it in this one time out of 100 scenarios. But if you like that look and you want kind of most of that look, you could probably get there with a 50 Summilux. Or you could take a look at vintage lenses, for instance, which is leads us into the next conversation.
Which we can get into right now.
So that's the other thing. It's like, well, should I look at modern or vintage? I'll let you handle that.
Well, this is a question that we get all the time. We have done shows and shows and shows and shows about vintage lenses, and I get emails. How is a 35 Summicron version 2 at f2 compared to a 35 Summilux FLE at f2 on a tripod shooting pictures of elephants in Africa? Like, okay. So there's so much that goes into a decision between a vintage lens and a modern lens. And my delineation between those two tends to be pre-digital and post-digital. So lenses pre-2005, I would consider vintage or like maybe semi-modern at the very late end, and then post-2005, I would say are modern, right? So modern doesn't necessarily mean the latest version. The thing is, there's more to a vintage lens than just the fact that it renders differently. When you're buying into the world of Leica vintage glass, number one, you can't just go to a Leica store and pick it up off the shelf because they're one of a kind in the sense that they're used. So whatever's out there is what's out there. Some lenses are very easy to find on the used market. Some lenses are really, really, really hard to find.
Mythical beasts.
Yes.
Yeah.
So accessibility. If you have a trip next week, you probably aren't going to find a 51.4 pre-spheric titanium, okay, in time. Maybe, but probably not. Whereas if your trip is in 6 months or in a year, and you say, Josh, I really want a silver chrome 90 Elmerit, well, okay, I'll find you one, in 6 months. So not only that, but vintage lenses just aren't built like the lenses we have today. They're much more fragile. The focus gearing is not as precise. They're more prone to haze and fungus, and they don't work as well in humid environments.
Cleaning marks or
It's
whatever.
like, yeah, it's like buying an old car. Like, you're not going to buy an old Model T or an old Thunderbird and drive it every day because those cars just don't hold up like a modern car does.
But then again, it depends, right?
Exactly.
Because, listen, there's not quite an experience as, like, if you love driving around in a restored, 1960s muscle car, it's not as fast as a 911, not even close. Yep. It doesn't corner worth anything, right? But the sound, the feel, a wooden steering wheel,
Yep.
that clicky shifter, cranking the windows down by hand and just going down the road. There's an experience to that. You're going to get way better performance in every possible metric out of a new performance car, a new sports car, than an old sports car. But it doesn't make the old sports car that much less undesirable if that's what you're after.
It's not always as simple as David is getting at here. It's not. There's an emotional connection that you generally are going to have. And I'm excluding collectibles here. I'm talking about vintage lenses you would use for stuff. You have to make an emotional connection, not just with the resulting images that the lens puts out, which is going to be its own special category, but with the mechanics, with the handling, the ergonomics, the feel, the quirks. 35-1.4 pre-FLE spheric. Okay, that lens is super fun, but that lens hood is, the 12589 is like this, right? And if you own that lens, you either love it or hate it, and that's part of the experience. If you have a 50 Summicron dual range, you have to know how to work with those goggles and know when to put the goggles on. So there's quirks to vintage lenses. You buy a modern lens, it's super easy. You put it in your camera. The hood's built in usually, or it's metal and it screws on. It's easy. So when you are deciding you want to expand your lens portfolio and you want to look towards the past, it's more than just about focal length and how does it look. There's so much more than that, like I just said. So when we say it depends, that's what we mean. And when you start getting to the specific focal length, and you get one of us on the phone, then it's a matter of like really, really diving into how it handles and how it renders and what it costs and blah, blah, blah. So I'm not going to get too specific right now, but that's generally the thought process that I'm going to have when someone says, oh, I want to buy vintage. Now, I happen to love vintage glass on the SL2, SL2S. I think they're super fun. And one of the big variables that's removed is calibration. Exactly. Because when yes, you can use a VisiFlex, but that aside, when you're mounting a vintage lens on an EVF camera like the SL2 or the CL or the SL601, you no longer have to worry, is the lens calibrated or not for rangefinder?
Because you're focusing right off the pixels, right off the sensor.
So for people that really, 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 really like to buy, shoot, collect vintage M lenses or R lenses, I highly recommend, at the very least, an SL601 to get the most in terms of consistency.
Now, see, I think we've got a little depends scenario here, because some people like vintage glass for that emotional connection, and using it on an SL2, probably not going to be very emotional. I mean, it's going to be, it's going to be productive.
I think it depends.
It's going to be productive, and you might get a higher hit rate.
Right.
But I think putting it on, I think a lot of people might want to use vintage glass with a vintage film camera. And then, this is what those lenses were designed for. So film is a whole lot more forgiving when it comes to focus accuracy.
True. Yeah.
And it's okay. So if you pick up a nice M3, throw on, old vintage 90 here with some Tri-X, you're going to have, it's like reliving the experience as it was originally designed to do.
Yeah, which is super cool.
Because you're going to have a period camera with a period lens with period film because they've been making Tri-X forever. So that's going to be a different experience. You could kind of make a hybrid approach and take the vintage lens, put it on a modern M camera, and I think vintage lenses are a lot of fun on the M10 monochrome.
Yes,
because
super fun. We probably talked about this before.
We did.
When you're not, that's another. So you still have the calibration variable, but no longer you have color vignetting or fringing.
Right.
That variable is removed. I'm just going to give a shout out to Dan who got a 35 Summicron Bokeh King from us recently, a lens we don't see very often.
No.
That is one of those lenses you have to really have an emotional connection to. Although what's cool about the Bokeh King is it's like kind of modern.
Yeah, it's cusp.
It's kind of modern. It feels kind of modern, so it doesn't feel like this delicate old, thingy, but it renders like nothing else. So nice, Dan. Thanks for joining us.
So then, and I think there's even another approach. So Leica has clearly recognized this desire for the classics. And starting with the Summicron, starting with the Summicron, they actually created, because, what Josh is talking about with the delicateness, with haze and fungus, oil on the aperture blades, peeling leatherette.
All kinds of things. Just don't get too harsh.
We're not going to.
They're delicate.
They're delicate. They're delicate flowers like Josh.
Exactly. Okay. Yes, I am like a vintage lens.
Wow. Let's put that on a t-shirt. I am like a vintage lens.
I think so. I think that's the new Red Dot Wear shirt, Kirsten.
I think you just got it. So we've talked about these before in other episodes, but this is a 28 Summicron, and it's a 1955 design, I believe, but same optical design, but brand new mechanics. So it's modern day, and this is very small. You probably can come back to me. This is modern day optical coating, so there can be clean.
Yes.
There's no haze and fungus. It's modern optical cement. It's modern lubricants, modern construction techniques, but it's the same look as the original. And the same is true of the reissued 51.2 Noctilux that just came out earlier this year. And before that, last year, or the year before,
a couple years ago.
2 years ago, the 90 Thambar. And these are all part of the Leica Classics line. We thought maybe this was going to be a one-off, but they just kept coming.
So we're on 3 lenses now, which is awesome.
We're on 3 lenses. And interestingly, it's from...
Now, I had a backup on this.
We've got one
you
from
out.
the...
you out.
So this is from the 1930s,
30s,
right?
Yeah.
Not 1950s. 1930s. You got the Noctilux, the Thambar is from the 30s. This is from the 50s.
Yeah, I can't keep... I'm doing a bad job.
Right.
I'm doing a bad job.
Okay, the Thambar is from the 30s. Yeah. The 28 is from
it's just it's screw mount, but just before
M
mount.
53 or something. And then the Noctilux is 1966. So you kind of have like 30s, 50s, 60s. I'm curious if they choose to continue that, but that's kind of best of both worlds because you could have vintage look, but with modern, don't worry about it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's yeah. Well, that's something we didn't have 5 years ago, which is kind of amazing that we can do that now.
Yeah.
I bet you we have a lot of questions in the chat or cool comments. We should take a moment to stop rambling and I'll... The 28 Summicron is great on my M9. That reminds me, by the way, this is unrelated. If anyone has an M9 they're not using, I need one. I want one. So please email me. I'm trying to find one. They're just there. I don't know. I don't care the color. ME, as long as it has a new sensor, I want it. I'll write you a nice sonnet. Well, how long is a sonnet? No, maybe a limerick.
A limerick, maybe?
Yeah.
I think you should stick to haikus there.
Yeah, right. Jeffrey, you should watch our Noctilux episode to choose between the 50.95 and 1.2 because I think we dive into it a lot.
Yes.
More than we could possibly do here. But hit me up if you still have questions about it.
And we also have a really good 50 millimeter episode as well.
We do, yeah. But the Noctilux 1.2 was not there, so.
But you can pretend it is.
We can pretend.
Actually, didn't you cover it?
We talked about it conceptually.
We did cover it, yeah, but not.
But let's just keep. I don't want to, ignore any good questions that are in here.
We have a question from Steven.
Oh wait, Jose's here. I totally forgot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm here.
Hey, Jose, how you doing?
Sorry.
All right. He's asking, I shoot with an M6 and just got a monochrome 246. Should I trade my 50 Summilux spherical for a 50 Apo?
Well, it depends, right? I mean, that's our theme.
It does depend. But let's. My brain's already going. My brain's already churning.
Let's
right.
talk it through. We're gonna talk it through.
Let's just rehash. So he has an M6 and a 246 monochrome.
So for those who may or may not know, M6 is a film camera.
Yes.
M246 is the prior generation M monochrome.
Yes.
That does have live view.
Yes.
And it is exceptionally good with the 50 Apo and with the 50 Summilux because I've used both and they're crazy good results both.
So he's asking, should I upgrade my 50 Luxospheric, great lens, been out 15 years or so, to a 50 Apple Summicron, which of course is the flagship 50 in terms of overall performance in the M portfolio? Well, the first thing that comes to mind, in my mind, is budget, right? Because that's probably, if we're going even pre-owned to pre-owned, a $5,000 upgrade. And what can you do with $5,000 other than just getting the same focal length? You could get a 35 Cron, a 21 Super Elmar together. So you have to ask yourself, when you're shooting your 50 Lux on your 246 specifically, are you wishing it was sharper or wide open, specifically at the corners? Are you shooting a lot wide open and saying, man, I wish the performance just allowed me to do more, shoot more things? Or are you saying, I feel limited by 50, I like the focal length, but I want to go a little bit beyond it on either side? Because if it's my money, if that's your only lens,
Yes.
If that's your only lens.
If that's the only lens, this is a different
if it's my
conversation.
money, that's right. We're assuming it's your only lens. I would not make the switch.
No.
Instead, I would take that $5,000 I was going to spend and branch out, ensuring myself that I was getting as new of a lens as I could in terms of generations.
Because it's not, a 50 is going to be a 50
Yeah.
in terms of perspective.
And you already have a pretty new 50, so.
Yeah, and I'd even argue because you are using film in an M6, you kind of need that extra stop. You don't need the light gathering on the 246 since you can safely shoot to ISO 10,000 super clean. But guess what? On film, not 10,000. On film, you're going to be shooting at 400, 800, maybe 1,600 at the most, and it's going to be grain the size of golf balls. With the 246 is a whole different ball game when it comes to required aperture. When you talk about modern M cameras, M10R, M246, M10 monochrome, these are, aperture is no longer a fast aperture is no longer required to shoot low light.
Yeah.
Aperture is now a creative choice. But when we talk about film, aperture is and the reason these lenses that Summilux and Noctilux were developed in the first place for film was because film photographers needed that extra bit of light gathering. It was the difference between getting a picture at a 20th of a second handheld or getting nothing.
It's just funny that now you understand, I think. We've just spent how many minutes talking about a simple question of should I trade my lens for something else?
Yeah.
And these are the kind of exercises that we're going through all the time. I don't want to spend too much time on this topic, but
No, but I would agree with Josh.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, the quick answer that we would give is no, you probably don't want to make that change.
in this whole scenario, we've assumed it's his only lens, which I just read is not. So
No, it's
that's
not.
But now we can't get into that whole thing.
Oh, no.
Let me answer one semi-unrelated question, which is, Leica did make a 28 Summicron in what they called matte black. It was limited edition, I think, of 400. They've disappeared. It's 11,629, I think, right? Or no, 11,692.
They didn't disappear. They went to Happy Homes.
Yeah. So if you find one, call me. What else? What else we got? Jose, what have I missed?
Let's see. Which system would you retain for the next 10 years if you could only keep one? M or L as one system to serve all your needs, commercial and leisure?
Oh, SL. If commercial, for sure. Because when it comes to reliability, I don't mean reliability of braking or not, but reliable results. Autofocus, tethering, super fast Wi-Fi and shooting speed. SL2.
And I would say we're halfway there with the SL601.
Yeah.
And if that's any indication of where we are with even more advanced technology in the SL2, I don't really have any doubts that could easily last for 10 years because I look at the SL601, it came out in 2015, 6 years ago. We're actually crossed that halfway point.
Yeah.
It still has one of the best electronic viewfinders. It's still instantaneous response time, both for the menu interface, playback, zooming. The camera, and it's weather sealed, it's rugged, it's got built-in Wi-Fi. It's a fully modern camera 6 years on.
Yes.
The SL2 and SL2S are that, but with built-in image stabilization, higher res EVF, more megapixels, more advanced sensor technology. I have no doubt that in 6 years from now, I'll be saying the exact same thing about the SL2 being a fully modern camera in
2027.
2027.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that, again, the question was if we could only have one. It would be hard for me to live that way because I like using everything.
But it depends because
yes,
because an M10.
I mean, an M10R would be. See, the thing about the M10R is number one, being a rangefinder camera, it's native to M lenses. You get the rangefinder experience. That means that incredible, huge, see everything viewfinder. The thin body, it's light. You can carry it. Plus, it looks cool. It feels cool.
And it's going to age beautifully over time.
It's get a patina.
Yeah.
It's very easy to find accessories for it. You can deck it out with soft releases and cool straps, and it's a tool that you could fall in love with over 10 years. But for me, my answer to that question is SL2, especially because you mentioned for commercial work.
Right.
If I was doing purely pleasure, amateur, nobody was relying on me, I would probably still lean towards an SL2, although M10R would be close.
Pretty close.
Because it's so the image quality it puts out is so good. It's a little deceiving sometimes because it looks like an M10. So when you think about the M10R, you think, oh, it's just an M10 with more resolution.
Yeah.
But that sensor is unreal. So I'm not going to get into that. We have a whole episode about that.
As I'm sitting here glancing down, I also realize that, a camera that I often recommend to people as a good entry point into Leica, this is 9 years old now.
Did I get the number wrong, Kirsten, on the limited of the Sumerons? It was 500? What did I say?
Oh, no.
Sorry.
Oh, no. This is an M240. M240 came out in 2012. It's 2021. This is 9 years old, and I think this is still a perfectly capable digital camera.
Well, at the price point these come in at, with the availability of viewfinders, grips, batteries,
it's exactly what you just said about the M10.
Yes.
Except this is a real life example of 10 years on.
And one of the advantages of long-term holding onto an M camera for long-term is because it's Leica's most popular system. That means you'll over time have the largest pool of fellow users, troubleshooting, accessories, and all kinds of third-party things. Like the more popular the system is, the more infrastructure it's going to have on a grand scale. So that's definitely an advantage of
larger
shooting.
Community.
Yeah, I mean, think about how many different cameras use the 240 battery. I'm not going to list them all, but a lot. So that's a huge advantage. Like you can find one almost anywhere. So the 240 remains one of the best deals going right now.
It's one of my favorite and most recommended entry points for those looking to get into the M system. For sure. I mean, because how much is a used M240 roughly?
They used to be a little cheap, but now they're approaching the 3,000 range again. But it's still
Really? Wow.
I prefer an ICL8 one, which is the way to go. Or at least one that's pretty clean. But they're starting to disappear because people are realizing
that what a great value it is. But that's the thing, because here we go. Okay, I want an M10. I want to get into the M system, but $8,000-$9,000 for a camera plus lenses. That's a lot. They could get a 240 plus a couple lenses for the same price as an M10.
Yeah.
And that comes back to because here's a depends question. Should I invest everything? Although there's usually a pretty straight answer for this one.
Yeah.
Should I invest more of my money into the camera or the lenses?
It depends.
Now, it does depend, right?
But our general recommendation is the lenses, but only at a certain point. You still want the camera to be modern and usable enough to fit your needs. So it's a balancing act in that scenario. But I would say if you have the budget for a 240 and have to compromise a little bit on lenses versus getting an M9, which now, of course, is the same price as a 240, so forget about that. An M8, maybe, which is also approaching 240 money now.
Yeah.
So it's become at that price point, it's become a little bit, the lines are blurred because they're all in the $2,000 to $3,000 price point. So at that point, I would get the newest camera that I could, the nicest camera that I could, and then start to build lenses from there. I'm saying within the $2,000 to $3,000 price point.
Right.
Not just because there's a big jump between a used 240, like the nicest used 240, and the nicest used M10.
Yeah.
That's like a $2,000 delta or more.
Yeah.
And that's a lens. That's a nice lens. That's a 35 cron, a pre-on 35 cron right there, which I'd rather have over the M10 in that.
Because you can have more as long. It's like it depends. As long as you're within the performance envelope that you need for the camera technology. because 240, like I said, it's great, but it's going to top out ISO wise at about 3200. I mean, it does really well at 3200 in mixed lighting. I shot it for many years, and I love the results at night. But you got to use it with a lens like the 35-1.4 or the 50-1.4 to really take advantage of it. When I shifted over to the M10, I was like, whoa, I can shoot at 10,000 ISO. And now that means, wow, I can use my 92.8. I can use my 21.34. Oh, wow. This like opens up creative possibilities for me because I love shooting at night in, urban environments. I love going into jazz clubs and bars and whatever and shooting night with all the color and everything. But it's something that I couldn't really do with the M9 that I was able to do with the 240 that I'm able to do with ease with an M10. And then, of course, the monochrome is just a game changer because you can shoot you could shoot by the light of a candle and, call it good.
Right.
So if you need that low light ability, you kind of have to go to a bare minimum of a body. But once you're there, once you're at that threshold of what's good for you, then it almost makes more sense to just work on your lenses because then that gives you more creative possibilities and more flexibility in your shooting and the type of pictures that you can create. And that's kind of what it comes down to with a lot of this is what options become available to you when you have a certain thing. I remember that I'm not going to name names, but basically that, there's a lot of talk of, photography, a great photographer, it's not about the gear. And, a good photographer can make great photos with a pinhole camera or with an iPhone. Like, it doesn't matter. Yeah. The camera doesn't matter. The lens doesn't matter. Just shoot everything at f8 on the cheapest thing you can find. And is there truth to that? Maybe, kind of, but not really, because I certainly find in my own photography that whereas I started shooting on film where I didn't shoot anything faster than 400 ISO, technique and creative freedom was limited. And as these tools have gotten better, as the lenses have expanded in their capabilities, it opens up all new possibilities. So I can take my experience, I can take my knowledge, and I can take my creative vision and express more of it. And I think that good tools don't impede you. They allow you the freedom to do what you want to do. They're not going to magically make better pictures for you.
Yeah.
But they don't get in your way of accomplishing what you want to do.
Yeah, there's no doubt that as you expand your kit and level up, there are less limitations on your equipment, but there tend to be, for all the limitations you remove from the equipment, you tend to then be limiting yourself as the equipment becomes more sophisticated. So it's always a balancing act of, yes, getting the good stuff, but then mastering it, like I spoke about feels like several hours ago, 20 minutes ago.
It was days ago.
Yeah.
And I'm just seeing you guys are really, I think we're spurring a lot of
there's some good engagement. There's more in the chat that we could go through, but let me just pause for a moment.
So here, I'm just going to say, just as a quick note on what we're talking about.
So I want to get Jose to ask.
Yeah, Wilfred says the buffer is kind of slow in the M240. The MP is better. Yes, you're right. But personally, for me, I never ran up into a problem with the 1 gigabyte buffer because that's not how I shoot.
Yeah.
That's not, creatively, that wasn't holding me back because I tend to be more deliberate and just take single pictures. Sometimes people ask me, and embarrassingly, they'll say, oh, well, how many frames per second does that do? I'm like, I think it's 10, maybe. We're talking about like the Q. I've never shot that fast. I don't know. I shoot 1 frame per second, 1 frame per click. I guess it shoots fast.
Yeah.
I use the SL2 and the SL2S, which shoot 20 frames per second in super high speed mode. I've never used that. Maybe for testing, but not in my actual practical photography. So whereas someone, and that's why everything depends, if you need to work fast and you're taking a lot of shots in sequence, then of course having a 2 gigabyte buffer versus a 1 gigabyte buffer from a 240 versus an MP 240, it's going to make a world of difference to you. But for me, a 240 is a 240 because I don't really notice the difference. And it doesn't make, either of us wrong or right. It's just your needs are different than what my needs are. And everyone else in the chat might have completely different needs from both of us.
Yeah, that's important to think about, is that we are really, really good at making like definitive like statements. But in the end, as we always try to, as a disclaimer, say
Chocolate is better than
that's
vanilla.
how we feel, and that's how we shoot and how we work. And I don't know what industry this is like. Your results may vary, whatever.
Yeah.
Because
your mileage may vary. Yeah.
right, your mileage may vary because every tool and tools that work amazing for us doesn't automatically mean it's right for you. But we're not just magically making them amazing for us. We're working, we're trying, we're testing, we're failing and experimenting to get to that point. And that's what we want you guys to do. We want you to use all the geeky, crazy stuff that we talk about every 2 weeks to then say, how can I use all that plus the equipment I have or the equipment I want to get to be the best Leica photographer that I can possibly be and, have a good time.
And start thinking, start kind of analytically working through these problems and do what ifs. And it's sort of like, I feel like it's like in middle school, making like lists of like, do I or don't I kind of thing, like the pluses of doing this, the minuses of doing this, and just draw it out, and say like, here's the advantage of one thing, here's the advantage of the other, here's the disadvantages, and kind of start weighing your options. Or, if you're trying to decide between two things, or if you have a specific destination or project in mind, what are your criteria? Start writing things down and say like, okay, I didn't even really think this through. I didn't think, oh, gee, I kind of need something that shares batteries. Or, gee, I didn't think maybe I need a backup camera, but that takes the same lenses. So, you know what? Instead of a Q, maybe a CL is a better choice as a backup for my SL, because in a pinch, I could always use the lenses.
Yeah.
And then think backwards of like, well, I love the SL2, but the lenses are too big. Okay, great. Use TL lenses.
Yeah.
Because they work great. It's like, how do we, I guess it's difficult to figure out what you want to do until you figure out what you need to do.
Yeah, that is very true.
Yeah.
And it just comes with practice. And also a willingness to ask yourself those questions instead of just throwing something in a bag and hoping for the best, which is also fine if that's your thing, but that's not how we work. Jose,
Sometimes we do.
Jose, have we missed any? I'm sure we have any burning questions in the chat.
Yeah, we have a question here in the chat that we get asked often. So
Okay.
I think it's a pretty good question to ask for everybody else too. SC Loop says, I just bought a black paint M10R. Is there a reason to keep my 24 megapixel M10?
Oh, that's an interesting one. Well,
Yes.
I have to fight here to say it depends, because it depends, right? The Black Paint M10R is a beautiful, rare, magical piece of equipment. There's two ways to handle that one. You put it in the box and never use it, keep it perfect. Or you use it, get it scratched up, get it brassed up, and love it. Mm-hmm. I'd probably go with the latter, but that's just me. Because the black paint finish is so delicate, there's no way you're going to keep that camera perfect if you use it. That's just not what it's about.
I mean, a half case will help, but
not really.
Not totally, yeah.
So if you're excited about the opportunity to brass it up and make it look like your own and one of a kind, use it. You probably don't need an M10
Also, yeah.
also unless you want either a backup body
or a second body with a different lens.
A different lens or whatever. So I don't know. It depends on a lot of things, like we said. Also, are you looking to get something else? Like, do you want to trade the M10 for another lens, or are you going to hold on to the M10 until something comes up that you want to get, then trade for it then, or sell it yourself, sell it to a store, all these things. But from a functional standpoint, the M10R is better than the M10. So there's no, like, if you just say, I'm only going to use one camera and I don't care if the M10R gets brassed up, then no, get rid of the M10. Let someone else use it, right? It's not doing you any good.
Leverage it for something you will use more.
Now, if you're shooting professionally or serious work or huge trips, keep the M10 because it has more value as a backup, because it's the same battery, the same VistaFlex, the same everything, than it does if you get rid of it. So
He says he's going to use his black paint M10R.
We like that.
Okay, well then if you're going to use it and you're perfectly comfortable not having a backup body, or maybe you have something else, then maybe you probably don't need the M10.
And if you just shoot with one lens at one time and you're okay with that.
Yeah. It's a sweet camera. I mean, we showed it on the last show. It's gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. That finish is amazing. So I'm excited to see how it wears over time, because I've seen a lot of beautiful MPs in black paint that have weared quite nicely.
Yes.
Jose, what else we got?
All right. We got a question earlier via email from Jeffrey.
Okay.
And it says, should I get an SL2 for my M lenses? do M lenses perform equally as well on the non-native SL sensors?
Interesting. So
This one doesn't depend as much.
it doesn't. Although there are some M lenses that I enjoy using on M's more so than on the SL, and I talked about this before.
Yeah.
The really, really wide angle fast glass, they work fine on the SL2. I just like the look. I don't know. There's something about the focus fall off I like better on an M10 or an M10R.
Well, it also has different micro lens structure. And all
Yeah,
that.
but like that's really it. Otherwise, I've never in any scenario felt that an M lens performs better or worse on an M than an SL2.
Right.
So,
and I mean,
yeah.
you can certainly get more critically accurate focus on an SL2.
Yeah.
You also have
I hit my dog in the head. The poor guy.
you also have a huge advantage
He's right there.
on the SL2 or SL2S using an M lens, which is you have sensor-based stabilization, which is like magic.
Yeah.
So you can handhold at a tenth of a second.
Yeah.
And
Let's be
catch up.
real that there are some people, often myself, who are not going to get their money's worth using fast lenses or vintage lenses on an M10, M10P or M10R or any M without using live view or VisaFlex.
Yes.
I'm perfectly
I
comfortable.
include myself in that
right.
as well.
David and I are both perfectly comfortable admitting when it's time to switch over to an SL2.
Yep.
Noctilux, vintage glass, tele stuff, 135 Apo. So we have discovered that the SL2 is probably the best platform for maximum M lens performance.
Well, or ultra wides. If you're going to use, like, I know it's not made anymore, but I still keep, and I love my 18 Super Elmar. 18 Super Elmar is more useful on the SL than it is on the M.
Yeah.
Because I see exactly what I'm getting. It's so easy, and I can just pop up grids and a level and pop. Although on the M10R you have the perspective correction,
Which
is
hopefully we'll
nice.
get on the SL2 one day. But
So
yeah. There's
They're-
no doubt in my mind that the SL2 specifically and the SL2S even more so are, for me, the most flexible platform for M lenses when I don't want to have that rangefinder experience. If I'm out street shooting
Right.
and I'm like hyperfocal 35 Cron F8,
Right,
yeah,
and
there's
you-
nothing beats an M10.
right, and you're pre-focusing on the lens, and you're just shooting from the hip,
yeah.
or you're shooting quick on a rangefinder, and you don't have the VisaFlex. I think that if I'm shooting 35, 50 kind of range, or even 28, that the M is perfect. Like a 35 Cron, 50 Lux are going to perform excellently on here.
Yeah.
But once we start veering into 75 Noctilux, it becomes pretty tricky to accurately achieve focus and really maximize that lens. That is just like an automatic for me.
I
on
see.
the SL.
I see the SL2 as I call it like an opportunity camera, and the reason I call it that, and I felt this way about the 601. I've actually been feeling this way starting with the 240, and it's been growing from there because the SL2 is essentially a platform that allows you to use pretty much any Leica lens ever made, and also other lenses, but not brands who shall not be named, with excellent results, with ease of critical focus, stabilization, and the ability to see through the lens in real time because of the EVF.
Yeah.
So even if you don't want to get zoom lenses or tele lenses and go crazy with the L mount, there's something about the SL2 or SL2S experience that allows you so much opportunity to use lenses that you may almost never want to use on an M10 because they're miscalibrated, they just don't work that well. Whereas on an SL2, our lenses are amazing. The 81.4, which we kind of made fun of last time, is actually super fun. 80-200 f4.
That is nice. Yeah. Underrated lens.
The 60 macro 2.8. I mean, there's so many fun R lenses available. I know someone's gonna be like, "Oh, do an R lens episode," like maybe one day. But my point being is the opportunities you have with the SL2 or the SL2S and the slew of adapters available, both by Leica and other manufacturers, gives you so much potential. And I go bananas with this stuff because I'm always trying out vintage stuff, vintage M lenses generally specifically on the SL2.
Yeah,
I love it.
I think the day that the SL601 was announced back in 2015, it was immediately compatible with over 300 existing lenses, like on day one.
Yeah.
That's absurd. Nothing else that I've ever seen in a brand new system and a brand new mount had that level of cross compatibility ever before. So take that.
Yeah.
Boom.
Let me just look real quick here.
Why doesn't Jose look through there?
No, I'm having a good time.
Let's look at our list.
The firmware on the SL2S. Oh, I hope we see SL2 firmware to match the SL2S in the next couple of months, but Leica hasn't said specifically what we're going to see. So
Okay, let's we're talking about SL. Let's say when would you choose SL primes?
okay,
SL primes, which
okay.
we did you have a bunch of them here.
I brought a slew.
A slew. A clutch.
A bevy.
But a clutch, right?
I don't know.
Clutch of
know.
lenses.
Is that a murder? Like a murder of lenses?
No, that's actually one of like Kirsten's favorite things. A clutch of
my
lenses.
goodness.
I don't know how many clutches, but it's more than one.
Anyway,
So SL lenses, which these look like the same lens, but they have different numbers on them. All the SL Summicrons are all the same physical outer barrel, but you can tell the glass is different. So and this is another question we get. I have an SL. Should I get a set of prime lenses? And it's right now we've got 28, 35, 50, 75, 90. And coming soon to a Leica store near you, there'll be 21 and 24 sometime soon-ish. So that's a full range. From 21 to 90 is what we're going to deal with. So let's, the hypothetical projecting out. And we've got 4 zooms. We've got the 1635, the 24 to 90, the 24 to 70, and the 90 to 280, which is, we just got it under the table.
not here. Well, it's over there on this.
Yeah, it's right there, actually.
Yeah.
So why, if the zooms cover all the range, and we've talked about it, and the zooms, I'm a big believer that the zooms are these, certainly the first 3 SL zooms, because that's kind of where I went from, the 1635, 2490, 90-280, are as good as Leica prime lenses at every focal length. So why would I get primes?
Leica did a funny thing with the SL zooms, because when the 601 first came out, we just had the zooms, and what they did was came out with a range of zooms that performed as good as or better than any of the prime lenses we had at the time.
M lenses. Yeah.
And, any prime lenses that we had, right? So we were like, these are awesome. Let's just shoot everything with zooms from now on the SL because we don't need primes. But then they came out and are still coming out with the Apo Summicron SL prime lenses, which are the best of each focal length that they have ever made in any system, hands down.
At every single one of them.
Yes. So they they did the zooms and they went up their primes. Then they did the Apple primes and they went up their zooms. So now the way we have to think about it has changed dramatically because your objective in terms of your photography, in terms of the kit and the packaging and the bag selection are going to determine, do you go zooms or primes or a mix, which is something we both do often. Personally, what I have discovered with, and I've probably talked about this to death, but I'm going to talk about it again.
And by the way, we have an entire L-mount lens episode.
Yes. The SL primes give you a creative opportunity you haven't had before because you can shoot wide open at f2 with zero drop off in corner performance. Because M lenses are traditionally designed with a fast focus fall off to be softer in the corners. That's just how they're designed. 50 apo and 35 apo excluded, and 75 noctilux. But anyway, the SL primes totally different. Where corner to corner, it's razor sharp. In fact, I've done this testing a million times. SL primes, the Apple primes, are sharper at f2 than almost any M lens is at 5.6 in the corners. So what you can do is now shoot in a way you couldn't shoot before. You can shoot landscapes at f2. You can shoot architecture at f2. You can shoot whatever you want and not be at the mercy of soft corners.
Right.
So I think if you know you're going to want that creative opportunity, the primes are the way to go. I think if you want the flexibility of the zoom, if you want the ability to have prime lens performance, non-Apple SL prime lens performance at every focal length, the zoom is the way to go. What are some of the environments that you've been in where you have found the zooms to be indispensable?
I can think of
pretty rough ones.
I think of pretty rough ones.
Yeah.
I've shot in the rain. I've shot under waterfalls. I've been drenched in many continents, and I've never had a problem with the 16 to 30, the 16 to 35 or the 24 to 90 or the SL. They've just, they're weather sealed, and when I say weather sealed, they're like weather sealed.
Yeah.
So in that scenario, let's say that I'm in the rainforest and I've got a 24 to 90 on. I'm going to try to make as many pictures as I can within 24 to 90, even if I have other lenses in my bag. Because the camera's only weather sealed to the point that you take the lens off. And then you've got this beautiful weather sealed package, and now you have a big hole in it. It's like underwater camera and you take the lens off. It doesn't work. Yeah, so if I had a prime, let's say I had this 50 on here, or 28. Sorry, if I had this 28 on here, well, I might be reluctant to change this lens to anything else, even if I was going to miss some shots, because I don't want to destroy my camera in a heavy rainfall. But I also am a big believer that sometimes the worst weather makes for the most dramatic pictures. So I want to be out in that. I'll dry out, but I don't want to destroy my camera because that'll be a quick end to my photographic trip. So, you know, I'd say the zooms are a more practical choice. And especially when I'm shooting landscape, I'm almost always shooting at f8, f11 anyway. It's a great equalizer. F8's the great equalizer.
Yes, that is true. At least with it, well, yeah, I would say with any modern lens, yes. Yeah, f8's a great laser. Yeah.
Yeah, so my 24 to 90, it's going to hold up pretty well versus the 28 Summicron at f8. And
yes.
I'm going to have sharp corners. I'm going to have sharpness front to back. And I'm going to have that flexibility where I can change the focal length without compromising the weather sealing of the camera. That being said, it's also a honking lens, right? And if I'm staring at trees, they're not going to really worry about it.
Yeah.
But if I think about going into a travel type of setting, we talked about Florence or Berlin or wherever, this is a lot more discreet. And I also might have better low light capabilities because I'm shooting at f2 versus shooting at 2.8 to f4. Or we have the 24 to 70 now, which is a lot smaller than the 24 to 90, and it's 2.8 all the way through. So, of course, now that's more complicated than it used to be. Leica keeps throwing us curveballs.
That's what makes it fun.
Yeah.
Let's we feel like we talk a lot of SL, so let's try to get to something totally different. Jose, any questions that we need to answer?
Let's see.
Oh, we have to address that.
23?
No. Yes. 20.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that's our next topic.
That's a big one.
Okay,
that's a big one because that's really common.
I'm trying to step my dog, which is that
We're gonna take a Jose question break
to put his face right where my feet are. So sorry.
1 second. Right. Let's see. Okay. So we have here. Looking for a vintage 50mm lens for my M3, and I already own a 50 Summilux. I have my eye on a 2.8 Elmore collapsible or 50 Cron rigid. Which will you choose and why?
When you get to that point, it's about availability, right? Because you can't get those lenses new anymore. They're both hard lenses to find. The rigid is much harder to find. It's also a better investment, but they're so different that it's going to depend on what you shoot. Are you doing portraits? Are you doing landscape? Are you doing street? Are you stopping down a lot? The collapsible, not a lens you're going to use on digital. The rigid, a lens you can. So are you going to go digital at some point? Go with the rigid. If not, so, there's a lot.
It depends. It depends.
Yeah. I need more information. So you can email me if you want. I don't want to, but I want to get to this topic.
This next one,
It's 9:40, so we're running out of daylight here.
It's funny you should say that.
Yes.
So
Yes.
we get this question an awful lot, and Leica has brought it on themselves because if they didn't invent the thing, they wouldn't have the problem with people getting confused about what to do. So we've got tons of choices. Leica has something unique, relatively unique, which is the monochrome versions of cameras. It used to be M monochrome, but now there's Q2 monochrome.
That's right.
So we have now 3 generations of M cameras and 1 generation of Q cameras built in black and white only monochrome versions. And so often I have people ask me, well, should I get a Q2 or a Q2 monochrome? Is it really that different if I'm just going to convert to black and white and all this stuff? So we're going to go through the thought process here of why there's a big asterisk. It depends on whether you should have a color camera or black and white. And I'm just going to run through a few of the common scenarios that we often have to answer. So a Q2 monochrome versus a Q2. That's kind of the first one.
Mm-hmm.
a Q2 monochrome versus an SL2, because essentially they're almost the same sensor inside, same resolution and all that. An M10 monochrome versus an M10R, again, same sensor, just one is black and white and one is color. And a 246 versus an M10, which is an interesting one because they're different generations. So you'd think maybe the newer color one converted to black and white versus the older black and white. But let's back up. I think the first three are easier to address.
Well, I think conceptually there are similarities between all four of these scenarios. And now David, of course, has done ISO testing on all these cameras, so we're not going to hammer that too much more because there's tons of amazing showdown articles.
And how many monochrome episodes do we do and all this stuff. Yeah.
But I think for me, when people say, the key part of that question is when they say, should I just convert my camera to black and white or shoot a monochrome camera? Well, the should I convert question is a loaded one because if you want to have that level of monochrome imagery from a color file, it's not a click and you're done process. Generally, there's a I don't want to say a secret sauce, but there's a methodology, a process, and a practice to obtaining results that you like, converting from color to black and white. And there's tons. The fact that there's like plugins and filters and stuff that tells you that it's not.
There's entire programs that only do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I would ask you, before we even get to the technical differences between a monochrome camera and a color camera, what is your comfort level or experience level working in Lightroom, Photoshop, Capture One, converting files from color to black and white? Is it something you think you're great at and you just have hit the limit? Is it something that you really don't know how to do and you just want to learn more about, or what? Or where do you fall?
I mean, I think there's another major kind of starter question, which is, how much of your work is in black and white?
Yeah, it's true, yeah.
And how much of your work do you want to be in black and white? Because if you choose monochrome, and again, we're oversimplifying and saying, this is your only camera. You're either getting a color version or you're getting a black and white. Are you willing to have 100% of your work in black and white from this point until you decide to change cameras? Are you committed to that? And going all the way back to our discussion on lenses and equipment, are you willing to limit yourself to black and white to force that creative option so that you develop that skill set? And I talk to a lot of people who are like, I see everything in black and white. I see tones, I see shadow, I see highlights. I don't see color. You know, I don't.
First of all, you should see an eye doctor if that's the case. I'm sure there's a few watching who can help you.
Right. Okay. But, you know, they conceptually think in terms of black and white composition. And you say, okay, who are your favorite photographers? And they rattle off all these black and white photographers. Like, okay, probably you want to get a monochrome because I think, you know, like I'll tell people is the monochrome does everything exceptionally well except shooting color. That's basically it. It does everything as good or better as the color version except shooting in color.
Absolutely. And
and if someone says, well, I like half my work in color, well, you should get a color camera.
Yeah. Well, and one of the interesting questions is, or one of the interesting additional things to think about now that the Q2 monochrome exists, which is a far lower price point than an M10 monochrome and much more accessible given all the virtues of what a Q can do. Suddenly you could say, I have an M10 and a Q2 monochrome, and you get the best of both. Now you could go for a used 246, but what the nice thing about the Q2 monochrome is you get, like I said, you get all the benefits of the Q2.
Right.
Autofocus, stabilization, macro, et cetera, et cetera.
But Josh,
Yes.
if I have 5 lenses, M lenses, I have a full M kit.
Yes.
And I love shooting M.
Yes.
Shouldn't I just add a monochrome rather than a monochrome body of whatever vintage rather than getting into a whole nother camera?
Well, it depends.
Depends.
Do you want a second M body? Like that seems like an obvious question, but the reality is you may want something totally different. You may want to have a different experience. Are you happy with the functionality of the M body? Do you find that the lenses you have perform well on the M, or are they older and you wish I had newer ones?
Right.
There are so many questions that you need to ask yourself, or that we're going to ask you to determine if a monochrome camera is right for you or not. Now, of course, with film, you could just switch out the film. This is different. You can't put a color sensor in your black and white camera.
No.
The nice thing about the Q2 monochrome being totally self-contained is it does give you an and option as opposed to an or option.
And I'll hit on that.
Yes.
Because that, I think you're not the only one to realize this.
Yeah.
I subtly picked up on this, not so subtly. You all may or may not know, but in about a week and a half, I'm heading off with Peter to Iceland to lead a photo workshop over there. And in preparation for doing our workshops, what we like to do is have a little pre-flight briefing. We do these one-on-one phone calls with all the attendees. So we say, okay, let's schedule time, and we all talk together. And we go through, okay, I mean, the nuts and bolts of do you have waterproof boots? Do you have a headlamp? Do you have gloves? The basics to keep everyone safe and comfortable. But we also go through, what are you bringing? And sometimes it's, I don't know, what should I bring? Then we get into this.
As they point to this episode.
Watch that episode.
That's right.
But as we're preparing for this, we've spoken to most everyone already. And overwhelmingly, almost everyone on this trip has an SL2 kit and an M10 monochrome, or Q2 monochrome rather, as part of their kit. And it's and what's even funnier about that, before I had those conversations and I was talking with Josh and with Peter and I'm trying to figure out my kit, and I said, I'm thinking of throwing a Q2 monochrome in my bag also. And I'm having these calls and I'm like, it's funny you should say that, because I had the exact same thought.
Yeah.
Because like Josh said, it uses the same batteries. Mm-hmm. It's a completely different experience. So I can have my SL2 on a tripod doing a long exposure, and I can grab the Q2 monochrome and I have it just around my thing. And because it shoots to 25,000 ISO, I can do a handheld shot in black and white, moody composition landscape, while I'm doing kind of a really dialed in low ISO long exposure on my SL2.
Or you can take grab shots of everyone else while you're doing, it's almost like you have two totally different setups in one.
Yeah.
Both from a functional and image quality and mentality standpoint, and you're doing it simultaneously.
Yes.
Which is pretty awesome.
Yes.
And so I think
it's a good and camera.
It's where the Q2 monochrome slots in differently from the Q2, which would probably just feel very similar to the SL2 if you had them both together.
Well, it depends, because I can tell you in the past,
yes,
Peter loves his Q116. He's got a first gen Q. He also loves the SL. So he'd very often be walking around with an SL with a 90 to 280 because he loves telephoto, but he also had the Q on his other side. So he had one camera on one side, one camera on the other side. And he had a wide angle with a 28, and he had his telephoto with a 90 to 280. And on those cameras, now this is before the SL2 existed, we had basically equal cameras, because the sensor in the SL601 and the sensor in the original Q were essentially the same sensor. So those pictures are interchangeable, similar to how they are between the Q2 and the SL2.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's not a bad way to go. So it depends.
And you can see why, I hope, after watching us say it depends for 2 hours straight, why that it depends answer comes up so much, because there are a nearly infinite amount of things to consider, or that we're thinking about, when one of those questions comes up. And we don't want to make a flippant recommendation that may not be right. We want to make sure that we're diving into those variables to figure out what's going to happen. What is going to happen when you get out there with that kit? Where's it going to end up? I mean, that's part of the fun, part of the adventure. Questions? Jose?
Are the performance advances in the modern Apple M mount lenses worth getting for a film camera? And would the render be noticeable on film or not?
Yes. Yeah, I think with a low-speed film or slide film, you'll see a difference. At least I've seen people shoot 50 Apple on an MP and get really good results. So yeah, I think so. I mean, there's only really two modern, digital era that are 50 Apple and 35 Apple. The 75 and 90 Apple are great, but they're a little bit closer to 50 lux type of rendering.
Yeah.
So yeah,
75 Apple is
I think
very
the Apple,
much 50 lux.
yeah, the Apple 50 and 35 are going to work amazing on film, and you're going to see a difference. I'm wide open. Obviously, an f8 is the great equalizer, as David said. But if you're shooting wide open and you want, it's very close to what you're going to get on digital. Again, with a low speed or a slide film, not an ISO 60.
Well, let's take just a brief look at that.
Yeah.
So if there was no difference in lens quality improvements over time, take a look at Leica's back catalog before the digital era. I mean, how many 50 millimeter lenses?
Yeah, we did a whole show on it. Yeah,
How many before digital?
a lot.
I mean, a lot, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot.
Yeah.
And if there was no difference, why would they have been updating optical formulas and improving the optics all that time for film if you really couldn't see it? The answer is you could see it. So yes, you will see higher quality optics on film will make a difference. Another easy way to tell that is if you've ever gone to the movies and seen projected film, shot on film, not on digital. Of course, lenses make a massive difference in terms of the look of the movie, same as the look of the image and the picture.
There you go. Sweet. Good question.
What else
we got, Jose?
Let's see. There's another one here. Well, somebody wanted to know about SO2 versus SO2S color science difference, and if you can expand on those two, which one would you take on a trip, or which one would work in what scenario?
So we actually have one of these SL2, SL2S combos. We did an entire episode on the SL2S. That's not a cop-out.
Yeah.
It does depend on what you are intending to shoot. I think for me, subject matter is the deciding factor. Subject matter and tripod, no tripod, whatever. I would say for fast and loose travel, event photography, portrait photography, documentary photography, I'd say the SL2S because I'd say it's more nimble in terms of its capability for ISO flexibility. It's got at least 2 stops ISO advantage on the SL2. And yeah, you drop down from 47 to 24, but generally 24 is enough to do a lot of damage in a lot of scenarios. But there's place for the SL2, which is, I use it for landscape because 47 megapixels makes a big difference. When I throw it in multi-shot, 187 megapixels. I mean, it's ridiculous image quality out of the SL2. I'm not shooting that camera in super low light. I'm not shooting that for super fast reportage or events where, quite honestly, having onerously large files is a detriment to your assignment. If you're a documentary journalist, you don't really want 47 megapixel files to chug through to then get to your editor and get up on the newswire and all that. You'd rather have something that's smaller and lighter weight. Same with sports, any of that. That would be my take. Or if you're going to be doing video, the SL2S is superior for video, but that we're not even getting into. Just talking about photography.
Yeah.
Also, you might want to use like that a TL lens,
like this one, yeah,
like this exact lens.
Well, this is one of the huge reasons why the SL2 can be extremely handy. Is when you mount a TL lens on the SL2S, you're down to 10 megapixels, which is, other than for like web stuff, it's not that useful in 2021. On an SL2, you're at 20 megapixels, which is more than enough for 20 by 30 inch prints. So if you want the small size, weight, and flexibility of TL lenses, or if you want the macro functionality of the 60 macro, which we talked about in the macro episode. Yeah, put that on there. The use of TL lenses is really going to be on the SL2, not the SL2S. So that's a situation where the SL2 is going to come out ahead. I often will bring the SL2 with TL lenses on
much
trips
lighter
because it's really, really light. The lenses are fantastic, and I don't need the resolution. I've been doing my last 2 trips. I took the SL2S with the 24 to 72.8, which has been a lot of fun to play with because it's something new, and I'm enjoying that lightweight kit, carrying it around all day.
And fast zoom combined with high ISO, combined with image stabilization.
Exactly, and I don't need those big files for anything for what I'm doing, so I'm enjoying that combo a lot. But I'm often, when it comes time for landscape or macro or just having a lightweight kit, I can fit an SL2 with like 3 TL lenses in a little Ona bag.
So you kind of have that best of your light TL lenses for walk around.
Yeah.
And then you can use either SL
11 to 23, 3514 TL, 60 TL. That kit is amazing.
And let's say that you needed full frame and all the resolution. You could, and if you wanted to stay small still, you could throw in an M lens.
Yeah, absolutely. 1 or 2 M lenses on the back-to-back caps, and I'm good.
Right. So there, I think there's certainly options for, and and a point for both. And full disclosure, I'm probably going to throw an SL2S body also in my bag because bring all the things, right?
Yeah, why not? I mean, I've been shooting a lot of SL2S and I enjoy it. I think the colors that come out of the two cameras are
It's similar.
they're so similar.
That was the question, was color science,
Yeah,
right?
I haven't really felt a difference in editing the
I use
files.
the same preset.
Yeah, they're coming in with my import preset. So no, I don't think that generally neither David nor myself are really considering out of camera color on any current generation digital Leica camera because number one, we're using import presets anyway. And number two, the files are so malleable that it's just a non-issue.
Yeah.
I think in the days of the M8 and the M9, when
mattered
you had
more.
a lot less dynamic range, a lot less color range, a lot less of everything, that mattered more. And that mattered a lot more in the era of film. But now we have so much bandwidth to work with. What the camera comes out with, so to speak, is not something that is just, it's not on our radar because we're not worried about it. We just want the most malleable file, the most dynamic range, the most amount of color, reproducibility. That's what we want. We don't necessarily care so much what the look is.
Right.
Because we're going to put our look on it. That's
The only thing that I care about when I'm evaluating a camera is what I can achieve at the end result
yeah.
and how hard is it to get there.
Yeah.
So if it's really easy where I can apply a basic import preset and then I just have to adjust highlight and shadows and adjust the white balance a little bit and I'm done, awesome. To me, that's out of camera, not the actual out of camera
Yeah.
because I'm not shooting JPEG and I'm not locked into what the camera's dictating. I have my own look and style and feel that I want. Different people have different ways. So you can tweak those, an import preset in Lightroom, you can make your own that applies to all your photos. And as they import in, they all have that look already applied where you don't have to do every single one, the repeat.
And you're also able to look at all your photos already 70, 80% edited, and that's going to make the selection process a lot easier.
So much easier.
Yeah.
So much easier.
All right, we got time for like one or two more questions, I think, because we're getting late. Jose, anything burning that we haven't talked about yet?
Let's see. We just got a question in the chat. Is there a Photoshop in Iceland to develop my film, or do I risk it getting X-rated by TSA?
I'm not shooting film in Iceland. I don't know.
Peter's shooting film in Iceland, apparently.
Yeah, I'm trying to work on him about that.
It's called Google. I don't know.
There is a film
Is
shop.
there really? Okay.
In fact, one of our customers and maybe viewers actually has a lab and a print shop in Reykjavik.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's an expat named Stuart.
Oh, okay. We'll go see Stuart.
I think he does film, but if he doesn't do film, he would know where to get film done.
So I'm sure we can figure it out.
So yeah, maybe.
All right. Recommended memory card for the Q2 monochrome, doing little video.
We use the Lexar 128 gig, 67X.
It's a V60 card, so it's rated for 4K video. But I mean, this is more like an ask us anything thing.
Yeah, which is fine. But I'm happy to answer the question.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. What did we? Someone asked. Wilfred asked, "Is night scene better with the SL2S?" Yes.
No. It depends.
If you're doing handheld, it's better.
Because if you're on a tripod,
it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. SL2 is better because it's more resolution.
Right.
If you're shooting M lenses, SL2S is better because the viewfinder gains up better in lower light, better for manual focusing. If you're shooting handheld, SL2S is better because the high ISO performance is better. That being said, if you're shooting handheld, but it's a night scene with enough light to take advantage of the stabilization on the SL2, maybe like a quarter second, depending on your lens, SL2 is better. I'm just saying, these are the things that I'm thinking about, right? Because you asked me a question, which is a great question. Thank you.
Yeah.
But it does depend on a lot of things. It's not just a matter of the camera with better low light performance is the better night camera, because that's not always the case, because better low light performance is only when you actually need it. If you're always working on a tripod, I don't care. If you say this camera is glued to a tripod, and it doesn't go above ISO 100, I'm like, okay, it's fine. I don't need it to. It's fine.
This is one we can hit on quickly. I think that.
Do you think it's possible for us to hit on anything quickly?
I actually do.
All right, this is the last thing we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
I'm tired.
All right. So I'm gonna pose the question to you. You can ask.
Yes.
This is another common thing that happens.
Yes.
I guess due to being trained over time through marketing and whatever, a lot of people believe that a faster aperture lens is always better than a slower aperture lens. So if that's the case, let's just pretend that's the case.
Okay.
Am I better off? And even if that's not the case, even if quality is the same,
Okay.
am I better off with all fast aperture lenses? If I get a 28-1.4, a 35-1.4, we're talking about M now.
Yes.
28-1.4, 35-1.4, 50-1.4, 75 Noctilux, and 90 Summilux.
Okay.
Okay. Those are all like crazy, bleeding fast lenses.
Yes.
Is that always going to be better than me getting, a 28 Elmerit and a 35 Summicron and,
Sure.
a 50 Cron and a 90 Elmar?
Well, it depends, David.
Really?
Yeah.
You don't say.
Well, first of all, we're going to factor out budget at this point because we're just assuming you have the budget for that, right? Size and weight.
This is a hypothetical. This is not a you have all these things.
Yeah, size and weight, number one. The size of a kit with that many fast primes on it is going to necessitate a pretty large bag or a backpack. If that's your goal, go to town. Now, if you're shooting something that doesn't necessitate or require wide open aperture, it's a waste. It's a waste of weight. It's a waste of size. It's a waste of budget. And it's a waste of excessively large filters.
Oh my
Don't
gosh,
forget,
yes.
the faster your aperture, the larger the lens, the larger the filter. The larger the filter, the larger the filter case. The larger the filter, the more filters you have, that's what you get. So then the larger the bag you have to get because you have to have one of these things with you. If you had a 28 Almerit, 50 Cron, 75 Summeret, whatever, you could have a bunch of E39 and E46 filters. You put them at f4, 5, 6, you're golden. From a performance standpoint, wide open lenses are not always the sharpest either.
That's true.
Maybe the 75 Noctilux is the exception, but the lenses are about the look.
And the 90 Summilux.
The focus fall off and the 90 Summilux, not wide open sharpest performance. So
Right.
I think a balanced approach is generally best. The fast aperture lenses for where you're going to be spending the most amount of time wide open, obviously, and build the kit out with some slower aperture lenses, especially for wider angle, because at a certain point, wider than 35, you have to get really, really exotic to have fast aperture, and those lenses are
21-1.4.
not
Yeah.
really about performance; they're about the look.
Right.
So you get a 24 3.8, 21 3.4, 28 2.8. They're super small, super light, super fun, and they're all very
It's almost like you described my thought process.
almost, yeah. So, then
Wait,
you're,
you were naming off my M
Yes, your exact kit, yeah. And then you go, okay, maybe you get a 35 Lux, and maybe you get
Wait, but I do.
then maybe you go crazy and get a 90 Summilux because that's really a very, very special lens
Right.
because you get the compression of a 90,
Yeah.
the sharpness of that crazy performance, and the crazy bokeh. So, yeah, it depends.
It depends.
And it also depends on the camera. If you say, well, I'm shooting with an M9, well, then okay, maybe the fast aperture makes sense. But of course, if you have the budget for all those lenses, you're probably only using an M9 because you love it.
Right.
That means you're already crazy. So,
Yeah, I mean, and you could kind of manipulate this question to, okay, do I need getting me more esoteric, right? Or less esoteric, more specific?
Yes.
Do I need a 35 Lux and a 50 Lux? And my answer is I had a 50 Lux, but I wanted the 50 Apo because it was just higher performing, and I at the time I was just chasing that perfection, and I was enamored with this reference level lens in such a tiny package, and I said, yeah, I've got to have that. But I also had a 35 Cron at the time. And it's like, well, these are kind of the same thing, and now I'm losing out on my 1.4. Now's a good time, and that was about the same time. This goes back to around the time of the M9 monochrome, so it was like 2012, 2013.
Yep.
And that's about when Leica redesigned the 35-1.4, the FLE, and I had some negative experiences with the previous 35-1.4 trying to get accurate focus without fall off, all this stuff. So I went to the Cron because it was just easy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I went from a 35 Cron and a 50 Lux to a 50 Apo Summicron F2 and a 35 Summilux FLE, and I never looked back. Because I knew that I didn't need a 35 Lux and a 50 Lux, and then that also freed up, as the technology improved with the M240, that I was able to add in a 24-38 and shoot no problem with that, right? So it's exactly what you're saying, where you have a mixture of fast and not so fast, And you're really not sacrificing anything because, I mean, the 24-38 is optically superior than the 24-14, even though it's a fraction of the price.
Yeah, that's very true.
So it's not always the case that 1.4 is better than 3.8 or f2. It's sometimes the case, but look, the 50 f2 Apo is superior to the 51.4 Apo in terms of pure performance. Anyway, it depends. It all depends.
And I think that is where we can call it. I feel like we've answered a lot of the questions.
Good, Jose,
really dove in deep.
give us.
Hopefully you enjoyed this more abstract type of episode. Yeah.
It was a bit amorphous, and
That's fine.
And
We're a
rambling.
bit amorphous sometimes, so it's all good.
A bit amorphous and rambling, and
That's our specialty.
hopefully you guys followed along and got something out of that giant.
No, we had
know.
a good time geeking out over this kind of stuff because we like problem solving and we like working our way through these kinds of things. It's fun for us. We do it every day. So.
And this you might find it fascinating, or you might find it terribly awful. Working through the thought process with us as we try to weigh all these different variables. And these were just a handful of scenarios. So obviously, if you have a specific scenario that you think that we can handle or help you out with, we'll help you out with it.
Yeah, that's why we're here.
So,
Want to sign us off?
yeah, thanks for joining. Did we have any announcements that we had to make?
No, we're going to be back next week. So, yeah, we're doing 2 in a row. So you're getting a twofer.
Oh, boy.
We got another one
boy.
Saturday. Be ready.
Well, yeah, because I'm going away to Iceland for a couple weeks, so we're trying to shoehorning it in
before he leaves, yeah.
Before I leave, if I don't
If I
survive.
think of anything important, tune in next week. Same
Yeah.
time, same place, same channel.
Right. So as always, a big thank you for tuning in. If we had no audience, we'd have no show.
That's right.
So thank you guys for supporting us and keeping us doing what we like to do, which is completely nerd out and on Leica gear. Big thanks, as always, to Jose.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks to Kirsten for keeping the chat clean and dropping links where necessary. Be sure to check out the description in the video. I have relevant links in there. There's links to past Red Dot Forum Camera Talk episodes. We've got almost 40 in the can now. So we've covered a wide variety of things. Be sure to check out red.forum.com for Leica news, reviews, tech articles, black and white ISO showdown comparison articles, and the like. And give us a thumbs up if you thought this was helpful. If you want to see more of us in the future and you're not sick of us yet, be sure to subscribe to the channel.
Even if you are sick of us, subscribe
Even
anyway.
Yeah, you know what? Even if you're sick of us, subscribe so you can know
When to avoid us.
Exactly. You'll give it a heads up.
We got it.
And as always, huge thanks to Josh for his encyclopedic knowledge and
Dad jokes?
and bad dad jokes. But and also I'm a little disappointed because you're not wearing plaid.
I didn't go with plaid today. So sorry.
So again, thanks a lot. Have a good night, and we'll see you probably in a week.
We will see you in a week. Good night, everyone.
Guys.
Good night.